Başlayabiliriz. Gelenler gelir. Bugün hocanın da Daniel hocamızın da ekranda yansıttığı gibi konuşmasının başlığı aslında son yazdığı makalesi, son çalışması olacak. Daha önceki çalışmalardan da tezinden de kısaca bahsedeceğim zaten kendisini takdim ederken. Hepiniz tekrar hoş geldiniz. Hocanın bugün sunacağı konu Global Performance of a Belated Concept, Revisiting Modernity Through Concept History. Doktor Daniel Kolland bugün bize bundan bahsedecek. Hemen Daniel hocamızın biyosuna, akademik özgeçmişinden bahsedeyim. Leipzig Üniversitesi'nde Arap Dili ve İslam Tarihi okudu. Bu süreçte İstanbul Üniversitesi'nde tarih bölümünde Erasmus'da bulundu. Yine yüksek lisansı Ludwig Maximilian Üniversitesi Münih'te Osmanlı tarihi üzerine yaptı. Bir senesini bu süreçte Boğaziçi Üniversitesi'nde geçirdi. Doktorasını bugünkü dinleyeceğimiz çalışmasının da aslında içinde aldığı ve ya da kısmen bulunduğu şeyi e, Freie Üniversitede tarih bölümünde yaptı. Global Intellectual History doktora programında. Tezinin başlığı inşallah gelecekte kitap olarak da yakın gelecekte göreceğiz. Bir aksilik çıkmaz hocamız onun hakkında da bize bilgi verebilir. Tezinin başlığı The Making and Universalization of New Time, A History of the Late Ottoman Turkish Magazine Servet-i Fünun 1891-1994 çalışmasını yaptı. Bugünkü bize sunacağı son çalışması olan da Kromos'da Cyber Review of the Modern Historiography dergisinde yayınlandı. Bundan daha önce yine alanın en önemli düşünce tarihi dergilerinden 2024 yılında yeni bir makalesi daha yayınlandı. A Strategic Eurocentrism, The Construction of the Ottoman Evolutionism in a Uneven World 1870-1900'dü. Ondan sonra yine şu anda çalışmalarını yaptığı ve yayınlanacak çalışmalarında önemli olan diğer bir çalışma da Inculcating a Progress Mentality, The Late Ottoman Struggles of a Transforming Society. Bu var ve yeni çalışması, monografı da belki tezinin herhalde genişletilmiş hali. Chasing the New Time, Young Turks Intellectuals and the Long Ottoman Revolution. Son olarak da Daniel hocamız şu anda gelecekte ve şu anda yürütmekte olduğu ve gelecekteki çalışmalarında Geç Osmanlı'da din ve İslam kavramları üzerine olacak. Ee, Bu çalışmaların altyapısından aldığı ve yine yeni çalışma yapacağı. Hocamıza daha konuşmadan teşekkür ediyoruz hocam. Sunumunuzu dinliyoruz. Siz de sunumunuza ister direkt başlayabilirsiniz, isterse de bahsetmek istediğiniz ya da bir giriş yapmak istiyorsanız siz de istediğiniz gibi bahsedebilirsiniz.
Bin teşekkürler. Yani ilk olarak yani Eylül'e seni içten teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Yani bu fırsat için ve yani siz de yani öyle güzel bir akşamda buraya yani geldiğiniz için. Yani maalesef konuşmam İngilizce olacak. Yani umarım ki musamat gösterebilirsiniz. Sonraki seferinde Türkçe olacak söz veriyorum. Tamam. Now switching to English. And yeah, thank you for this very short introduction. But I think it's gave me a perfect stage to also sort of introduce this particular presentation I'm giving, which yeah is based on an article I published in April, and it is just to as a quick disclaimer at the beginning, it's not going to be on modernity as a phenomenon, not about the social or political or economic history of modernity. It's rather about how we as historians can talk about these phenomena and how problematic the concept of modernity is when we try to discuss these particular phenomena. So it's on the meta level. And I think it is exactly for these kind of moments that concept history is particularly powerful and useful. So it is this presentation is trying to be both discussing the method in itself while deconstructing a concept which is omnipresent, modernity, right? So this is going to be the aim of this talk and the paper to question the analytical worth and value of modernity without offering an alternative yet. That's going to be for the future. But yeah, to just be to be aware of the problems that come with that concept. So to understand where I come from, I would like to give you some more um, notes on the research context in which I sort of engaged with these questions, and where the question of modernity became especially pressing for me. And then I will discuss concept history as method. Then I will discuss the history of modernity across the last century. And then in the end, I will discuss with you guys the implications. What can we learn from this? And of course, this is the moment for the Q&A, where also you guys will be able to chime in and question my approach, or give me your perspective on that. And I'm really looking forward to that, of course. So the research context is, as Eylül already sort of introduced me, was my dissertation, which was on late Ottoman imaginations of modernity. So the questions of how did Ottoman Muslim intellectuals perceive, how did they discuss, and how did they also enact modernity. And by looking at periodicals, especially illustrated periodicals, as Sabit Fünun as a source. And when I started this project, it was was very apparent where this thing would go, because the moment you open these journals, modernity was everywhere. Modernity is, the way they celebrated modern technology, the way they celebrated the bicycle as a new individual mode of transport, the way they engaged with bodybuilding, as you can see on the left side, the way they engaged with new and possibly provoking European art. So it was, it was obvious. Yeah, this is modernity, of course. What else could it be? But of course, when you do it like that, then you have two big problems. The first problem is that you basically reiterate a narrative that historians of the Ottoman Empire have been trying to debunk and dismiss for like half a century, that modernity is the West, that no, it's a small circle of intellectuals, elite members brought modernity from the West to the Ottoman Empire as a passive recipient. Of course, this is a narrative, that is obsolete. This narrative has been disproven, and it's problematic. So this is one thing. So on a also political and maybe ethical level, this is wrong. But on an analytical level, the problem is, do we get closer to understanding modernity? And of course, I'm in this hermeneutical circle of projecting my own concepts of modernity on my source material, these beautiful Turkish language Ottoman newspapers. Do we come any closer to understanding this phenomenon? And of course, the only way to remedy this is to dive into the theory. What is modernity? What is this concept? And I'm sure many of you have gone down this road or this rabbit hole, and reemerged from this rabbit hole more confused than before, because modernity basically means everything, and there's a huge literature on that, right? But the problem is modernity is used for often very contradictory phenomena. Modernity can both mean being rational, embracing new technologies, but also can mean being against technology, being against the Enlightenment rationalism. It can mean individualism. It can mean fascism. It can mean everything at the same time. Everything is modernity, basically. So how do we maneuver our way through this conceptual confusion? So yeah, in basically, I next to this extreme confusion and semantic indeterminacy, which I think is very characteristic for modernity, I found two other things. So, but by semantic indeterminism, I mean the concept itself doesn't really mean anything. Modernity means newness, right? It's the substantive of modern. It's nothing more. There's everything else is just a signification of historical actors. So that's one big problem. It's a shell. It's a conceptual shell. There's nothing in it. The second thing is it's extremely normative, right? So being modern is good. So casting something as modern always means to invalidate something. Like saying that the bicycle is modern means that the bicycle is good. Saying something is unmodern is the opposite. It shows that this thing is not good. So this normativity is always there. And normativity and analytical clearness don't go together very well. And then there's, of course, for me, the biggest problem, which I already addressed, is the Eurocentrism. Whatever we do, modernity always somehow is connected with societies from the Northern Atlantic. So they seem to be the model for everything. And this, of course, is very problematic in any way, in every kind of way. And yeah, this is something that creeps in. So for myself, this quest to understand modernity ended up with my observation that modernity is always something, it's always a gesture of the powerful. So those who dominate the discourse can signify something as modern, and this is their discursive power to invalidate something. Performative as well, in a sense. It is not about the content; it's about what it means to the people around them, and it is essentially contested. So it is always something that is never clear in itself. It always has to be renegotiated all the time. So long story short, modernity doesn't really mean anything. It is a very fancy word with a lot of power, but doesn't help us as historians to understand anything. Um, Yes, so this is the problem I was dealing with, and I guess all of us are dealing with. But for me, I decided I cannot save this concept. I have to take another route and to say something new about the Ottoman Empire. Oh, sorry, I hope I did. Yeah, the title of the dissertation also reflects how I try to solve this problem. I'm working with the concept of new time, which of course means in theory the same as modernity, but new time has not this halo. It's not a particular word. New time doesn't really mean anything, and it is most specific because it deals with temporality, and temporality is the thing I was actually into. When I sort of engaged with this journal. So how did they talk about historical time? How did they say what now is different than everything that came before? This break, how did Ottoman intellectuals discuss this break? What is new and what is old? So this constant renegotiation, I think new time catches this better because it's more precise and because it's less loaded. So in the end, I engaged with the concept of historical time, like Inkılap, Tikamü, Taraki, and especially Millet Hazara. So how do these concepts, how were they used by intellectuals to change society, to drive their own visions of social, political, intellectual change? Yes. So this was my personal way out. This will also inform the book I'm writing. And there's also an article coming out on in Club in Turkish actually. It's just a short one, but yeah, it might give you a sense. These concepts, they are also a cluster of concepts of historical time, which Reinhard Koselleck, one of the founders of concept history in the traditional German sense, identified as particularly formative of modernity. Here it's coming back to the back door for me, of course, right? But I'm not saying that modernity as a whole was there, but sort of this notion of a break in time. This is what I'm interested in, and this notion was constructed discursively and negotiated through these particular concepts. Okay, so this is the context for what I did with modernity, or why I was so obsessed and haunted by it, and why also in the end I decided to go against it. But yeah, I still had an unfinished business with it, and this also had to do with the way my supervisor, Margaret Panau, looked at this whole thing. She's not an Ottomanist; she's a South Asianist. But yeah, we had the same question of modernity basically. She wrote a fascinating book on the middle class in Delhi, the 19th century middle class in Delhi, and while she wrote this history of the middle class in Delhi, she also engaged with this particular question of how do 19th century Indians deal with English concepts. So, to put it very, very schematically, she tried to find a third way between two extremes. The one extreme is to just dismiss all Eurocentric analytic concepts, just not using them at all. This has been used by this has been the approach of some historians. And the other approach is to just use them anyways, to just, take them as they are. Dipesh Chakrabarty, for example, in provincializing Europe, he acknowledges the problem of these concepts, but at the end he says, well, we can't do without them. We have to deal with them. And Margaret Panner wasn't really happy with this approach, and she sort of suggested this notion of provincializing concepts. And this has two major advantages. The one is that she will save research concepts which have been around and which are very important for discussions among different disciplines and discussions among area studies and global historians. Because when we all use our only specific source languages, then yeah, we stay in our little corners. Like of course, an Ottomanist knows what the Tanzimat is, but a historian of Russia doesn't know what the Tanzimat is. So we have to use the word reforms to communicate with someone working on 19th century Russia, sort of on this level, right? So communication is possible, sort of becomes possible. And then the second thing is that the historical actors who actually study the 19th century, or most of them, actually use the very same Eurocentric concepts when they discuss their society. So when we discuss the concept of race, for example, which is a European concept, and it has this own very very specific history, we know that by the late 19th century, Ottomans used this European concept of race and accordingly also organized the world around them through this particular concept. The same is true with edebiyat. Like, it's a new concept, edebiyat, as a translation of literature or belles lettres. And even if this is, a European concept, it became performative for late Ottoman intellectuals. So when we say literature or race are just European concepts, we also sort of do epistemic violence to our historical actors who use these concepts. Yes, so Margaret Panner sort of suggested that to understand how the research concepts we use are actually very Eurocentric, but at the same time how they were translated in the late 19th century into other languages. So she works on the concept of middle class or civil society, and she shows that Indian intellectuals actually worked with these concepts, and that when the historical actors could translate and transform these concepts, also we historians can sort of empty them of their Eurocentric content and open them up again. It's a very long process. It may sound a bit esoteric maybe, but I think it could work for certain concepts. And I think concepts like race, middle class, bourgeoisie, cosmopolitanism, and of course the word cosmopolitan was very present in late Ottoman discourse. The Turkists used it all the time to actually attack the people from Servet Fünun, right? So it's there. We can't just delete the concept. This now my big but comes. This only works for concepts which were actually there, and what I show in my article is that modernity wasn't really there. You can't really say that Ottomans looked at the modernity concept during the Tanzimat and accordingly sort of reimagined the world, and neither did British or French intellectuals use the word modernity to change their societies. So yes, or not to now I've jumped a bit to the conclusion, but let's take one step back. So I have the research question, sort of when, how, where, and why did intellectuals at the turn of the century actually use the modernity word? I'm saying word, not concept. So this is also sort of a source of confusion that concept can mean both idea and word, but here I mean the word. And then also the second question is these three things I identified earlier as problematic for modernity, have they been there all along, ever since the modernity concept was there? Okay, so so far. Now let's discuss what is concept history, what can it do? To put it, very to make it very short, concept history analyzes, studies language in use. That's very important, in use. So you need the words, not just ideas. Use in a diachronic, so across time, and synchronic way, so in the same temporal plane. So yes, I think these are very fancy words for something very, very, very easy for historians, or something we do all the time, sort of study how people in the same time period used one word. So to say with the example of race, how across society was the concept understood, and then also across time, how did it change? So these are the two axes, time and synchronicity. So this is the first thing. Then there's two approaches to understanding concept history, or to practicing concept history. Again, very fancy words, but bear with me. So the one is the onomasiological approach, sort of what names, what words were used to describe a particular thing. If let's say we have a clear object of a ethnic community, sort of what words were used to describe that. Um, just one example, yeah. And of course, the problem with modernity is we don't know what this thing is. Sort of, we cannot even sort of, you know, um, make a semantic net around it and identify the thing in the middle. It's just, yeah, where do we start when you try to understand modernity? Um, yes. So, and the other approach is the semasiological approach, is sort of we look at the word and look at the meanings of this word, sort of to what did it refer, in other words. And this is the approach I took. So I began with looking at modernity, at the modernity word itself, and see where it was used, how it was used, and what it meant. So these three things, basically. Um, yeah, so I call this a radical semasiology because I really only look at the word. And I also don't look at close words like modernism or modernization or the modern world, or everything with the adjective modern. I don't look at that. I really just want to understand what modernity meant, because yeah, modernity is it's this pure temporal denoma of discussing temporality. It's this newness. That's what it means, right? And yeah, how was it used in time? This is what I'm really interested in. So just to give you to contrast that with, I think it's one of the best books on modernity. It's in French, unfortunately, but I think translation software is really good now. Discours dans les temps by Christophe Charles, and it's sort of it's history of French modernity, and he says, well, modernity not only sort of emerges in the 60s, in the 1860s, but you can basically start way earlier because basically the idea was there already before. I think this makes sense. It sounds intuitive, but it's really not tenable analytically, because we don't really know what the idea is to sort of to project it backwards. So that's a bit of a problem, but it still is a beautiful social intellectual history. I can really recommend Christophe Charles. It's really, really good book. Also quite massive. We would have something like that for German or English history, just this, or let alone Ottoman Turkish history. This would be just incredible. Sort of how did people discuss time and yeah, let's not go there. Anyways, yeah. So I'm not going there. I really just look at the word modernity, and I think it's very useful for contested concepts like modernity, which where the performance is more important than the meaning. I would guess. I would ask, and ultimately it allows me to perform what I'm trying to do, to de-essentialize modernity, to show that modernity is not this thing that happened for the last 300 years, but it's something that we historians construct and reconstruct all the time through our narratives, right? We reify this particular concept. And by looking at the concept itself, we also see how basically everything, how this uniformity and how this homogeneity in our minds just sort of, yeah, doesn't hold up to scrutiny. So these are the three things I think are possible through this approach. All right. So this was, a lot of introductory words, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty of our historical period. Mm. And of course, when you look at the modernity word in Western Europe, you have to start with Baudelaire because he used it for the first time. And it's also interesting to look at how he defined it. So he used it to justify a form of art that breaks with classical concepts or concept of aesthetics concept. Sorry, yeah. So he basically tries to validate the new as opposed to the old. So modernity and art can only be good, he says, or beautiful if it combines both worlds, the new or the transitory, the fugitive, the contingent, and the classic essential. Yeah, sort of the universal and the particular. They have to come together to become good art. And yeah, so he's used the word modernity in italics, which I think is quite beautiful. And he also explains this choice, saying there appears to be no better word to express the idea at issue. So he gives us an explanation. So why do we need this word? Because we need it, and I think that's quite nice. But then we're in the 1860s. What happens with this word? 20 years later, it has become quite popular in certain classes, in certain circles in France, particularly Paris, and in intellectual circles. So people use it, but Jules Lemaitre, who's a art critic and writes a history about this generation around Baudelaire, he also has a few discussions on passages on that. So okay, I read it out. So it is easy to grasp this neologism, modernity, but it takes an effort to determine what it represents, because the modern changes imperceptibly, and then the modern is displaced or mixed with what is not modern or not anymore. Modernity is primarily, if you want, in the entirety and in the detail of exterior life, in the manner of painting, which is peculiar to our times. And then a whole page of more qualifications later, he says modernity, it is a thing both very vague and very simple. Wow. I mean, this doesn't mean anything. He's just wasting our time here. But yeah, this is sort of the word modernity means something. So it has some value. People use it. But at the same time, they struggle to pinpoint what it really means. Already in the 1880s, we have to really, we shouldn't forget this. Already when it was coined, people were like, but what does it mean? All right. So this is the French context, and the concept traveled across Europe, and often actually in the French word. So when English and Germans were using the word for modernity, they would use the French word modernité in both languages. Also, they were, of course, eventually they were their own object. There were translations, like in German, die Moderne, or modernity in English, of course. So more. More examples. Yeah, so but sorry, the conclusion is yeah. So modernity is indeterminate. It is normative, so it has a meaning, it has a value, but it's mostly aesthetic. So it's not a political or a social concept. It's only used in this particular sphere. There's also something we need to we shouldn't forget. So across Europe, how was it used? German language naturalists used it actually, and actually also quite normative. They used the modernity together with revolution, reform, and like intellectual sources had also socialist bends. So it actually came quite close to later modernity concepts, but it was a very short-lived moment. And already in 1904, it was basically declared bankrupt, and it lost the specific connotation. So it was it's a history of failure, basically. So then other examples. So we have from a London newspaper, we have they all, so by the way, all these notes are also on the article. So in case you want to read up on them, it's also there. So in 1911, a journalist from London describes it as as modernity as being in touch with or in advance of the thought of our time. It breaks new paths, offers new forms and modes of expression. So it sounds familiar to us, right? It seems to mean something, but it's more of a mindset than an actual object, right? So. This is also reflected in another article from New York, which I really love. It's called Malady, so sickness of modernity. And so the journalist, I think it's a he really dismisses the concept of modernity or the whole mindset attached to that and calls it a slavery to the present and says that, we moderns, we never care about anything that happens before. So we lose our sense of greatness and we are actually provincial, but in the temporal sense. And I think that's very powerful. So, but yes, as a conclusion, the indeterminacy stays. It's still mostly semantic, still mostly normative. Is it Eurocentric? No, because it was modernity was rarely used to describe larger contexts. And which brings me to the next point. Um, Modernity was actually extremely marginal in West European languages. It wasn't a concept that was used all the time. Even in the 1880s, I found like a little footnote in an article where someone sort of complains that this modernity, what does it mean? There's no entry in the lexicon for it. Like it's just a fashion word. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it's basically. Oh, sorry. I jumped a bit ahead. So basically, yeah, what we have here is that modernity, as a period, as this new age in human history that it's supposed to describe, happened without the modernity concept. It happened with other words. Other words we use to just to in societies to push change, to discard the old. And here I have a Google Ngram viewer. And of course, progress. Progress was this word, was the most important word to, for any social, intellectual, political history of modernity. It's progress, not modernity itself. And as well, civilization is way, way more important, as you can see on this second engram. So only in the late 1990s did sort of modernity overtake civilization as this one normative concept. But basically, colonialism, Eurocentric, the all the crimes of European colonialism, they were perpetrated with the concept of civilization, not modernity. Yes, so this is really important when it comes to understanding the performativity of historical concepts. And of course, it brings us to a last point, which might be interesting for that. The rise of modernity in the 1990s, we see right this sudden surge, rocketing of the modernity word. It has to do with post-modernity. So it is when you look at when does this concept appear in titles and who are the who wrote on it. Of course, the big classics of this era, especially Habermas, the 12 Theses on Modernity, a very influential book in the 1990s, or Bruno Latour with Never Been Modern. So all these books were written in the 1880s and 90s, sort of as a response to a so-called crisis of modernity. So when an era came to an end, supposedly, they suddenly realized how we have to understand this era, and they gave this era the label modernity. So basically, when we use modernity, it is an epochal consciousness, right? It's our era, which tries to define the era before. But this doesn't mean anything to people living before that. Our epochal consciousness. And of course, in sociology, modernity was used, but it was basically just like just a new and more politically correct word for civilized, right? Traditional was savage, and modern was civilized. Anyways, I think there's not much research on this particular moment of stock taking, but I think it would be super interesting. Okay, so long story short, modernity wasn't really a thing as a sort of concept in Western Europe or the United States for that matter. What does this mean for Ottoman history? I think there are several things to take away from that. So first of all, it takes away sort of this pressure on Ottomanists to explain why Ottoman intellectuals didn't use the word modernity. That's something I had to do a few times at least. I mean, why wouldn't they use this word? Doesn't mean that they had no concept of it. That it doesn't mean that they rejected it. No, just it wasn't a concept you would use. And the other concepts which were all over the place, like civilization, progress, revolution, we find them in our Ottoman sources as well. So they were right. They were really partaking in this zeitgeist and this epochal consciousness of the 19th century, even without the modernity concept. So that's one thing. But the second one, I think this is even more interesting, but also a bit nerdy, is that it allows us to look again for the modernity concept to understand where exactly was it used. Because now I know that it was not a very prominent concept. Also, and knowing that it was particularly used in aesthetic contexts like literature or art, this also might help us to sort of refine our lenses and look for it again. And this is what I did basically when I learned about this. This is from a Shimsin Sami Kamus of Francevi from 1905. The years before don't have it, don't have this entry. I checked all of them. So this the first time they no, it's from 1900, sorry. But yeah, so yeah, this moment, yeah. It's in the article. You can check it up. They actually had a concept for modernity. They understood what it means. Yenilik, newness, right? It means exactly that, newness. And the interesting thing is they also used it as the in a similar way as their French or English or German counterparts. So it really sorry, I'm jumping a bit as well. So it sort of emerged in I would say, and I've done a few keyword searches in that respect. The whole decadence debate in Severed or around Severed was a moment when Yenilik became really prominent. Not really prominent, but prominent. It was used as an argument, right, to celebrate certain new styles, to celebrate or to justify certain breaks with the past, with literary conventions, etc. So Yenilik worked like modernity as this very specific thing, also as a sort of as a mindset. Yenilik kafası, that's something that yeni kafalı became the translation for modern in several instances. So yeah, they didn't have a word for modern, but so what? Modern doesn't really mean anything else than new. There's not much more. There wasn't much more performativity attached to that. But and this is where this is much more than a translation. After 1908, after the revolution, the Young Turk Revolution, Yenilik became became a concept that it was used a lot in political debates. The Turkists used it all the time. Yenilik became their favorite word. But also Hüseyin Cahit or Hüseyin Cahit used it like how to describe or to justify the CUP and their rejection of everything old. So Yenilik became a battle concept. That's I think also a useful thing a useful way to think about concepts, like they're being weaponized. So Yenilik, this heroic affirmation of the present, this is newness. It's a new in historical time. It's not just any newness. This is progress in historical time. It's something unprecedented, something new. So yes, so we see it a lot in after 1908. But the Turkish state, they become the most modernist group in general, and this also has to do, of course, with that the language, but also their claim to go against the old elites. So people like Ali Janib or Ömer Seyfeddin, and of course, yeah, Gökalp used extremely modernist language, and it was also them who basically uh, really translated modernity into the Ottoman context. Mm. So Gökalp, he used the word, he coined the word Asrilik from among a number of other words he himself coined as a response to um, so that these words fit better into his anti-Western ideology, right? The Turkists were extremely Eurocentric in their upbringing, but and they know they used literature and they used sociology, but they were extremely anti-imperialist, and so Asri, in all its variations, muasırlaşmak, asırleşme, asiret, etc. They always allow um, uh, dismissing other concepts like Europeanization. Um, Avrupalaşma, Gaplılaşmak, these are concepts which were very prominent since the 1890s, and they were not just becoming European, but they also meant, becoming modern, basically, to make this temporal jump from one stage to the other. Yeah, it's temporalized. Um, and these purely temporal concepts like asri and muasırlaşmak, asriyet, they sort of allow anti-imperialist intellectuals to discuss historical progress by sidelining Europe. I mean, I'm not saying anything new, I guess. This is something must sound very familiar to all of you, but it's this pure temporalization of progress. This is it's quite advantageous for the Young Turks. So yeah, they also use Asrilik against Yenilik. So they're very similar, but Asrilik is more of a state, whereas Yenilik is an action. It is, yeah. But Yenilik was continued to as translation for modernity until the 1930s, I think. So I saw this in dictionaries. And also, what's really important is that Asrilik allowed them to differentiate between the modern times and modernity. So hali hazır, it is a chronological stage. So there's a few examples of in discussions when they differentiate that. So the Turkish society is in the same time as Western Europe, but it's in different historical time. So chronologically, they're the same. They're both in the 1920s, but when it comes to historical time, the one is more advanced than the others. So this differentiation between chronological and historical time becomes possible with that. And this is a thing I haven't seen so conceptually neat in the Ottoman period. So yeah, the Turkish really boost that concept, and Asterlik never became this central for the Kemalist movement, but it's there. It's definitely there. In Kulab, of course, it's way more important. Also because I think it's way more evocative and concrete. Of course, also this concept, is open to scrutiny, but Asrilik is a bit too intellectual. But it was used again, and of course, Asri, becomes omnipresent. Asri aile, Asri ev, Asri kıyafet. It's this one key concept that allows us to understand the Kemalist mindset. Okay. What's interesting, though, as a last sort of side note in that respect, is that in the 1920s, also the Islamists, the people around Sivil Rishad, really tried to use this concept of Asrilik. So if you look through the pages of Sivil Rishad, 1923, 4, 5, Asrilik is omnipresent. They really try to capture it, to use this word for themselves and to utilize it for their societal visions, right? Of reforming, of bringing, of changing Turkish society, changing imperial society or transforming imperial society into a Turkish one via Islam, and that Islam should be the central lens through which all change should be thought. So Arçelik really is everywhere. And here we have a very nice sort of passage which shows how they understood it. Right? İşlerimizi asra uydurmak fikri bizde oldukça kadim bir tarih tevellüde maliktir. So it's always been there, right? İslamiyet bize daima asırlık fikrini ilham eden bir menba feyyaz. Right? So it's been always there. It's nothing Europe brought or anything. It's been always there. So they retry to use that or to appropriate that concept. And in 1925, right before the journal was forbidden by the communist regime, censorship, etc., they understood that they had lost the battle. So Arçelik had become too immersed or too much associated with secularism, laiklik, which also a concept that emerges in these years, and women's rights. So they fought an uphill battle, the Islamists. In the end, they understood that we can't save the concept from these nefarious contexts anymore, so they gave up the concept. It's really interesting. Please just look through these pages. But it shows that Arçelik is completely malleable. It can be shaped by everyone. Because it means nothing, it can be used and it was normative, but in the end, it was captured by those with the actual power, right? The Kemalist regime, those who had the power to silence others. So this is basically the story of Asrlik, of modernity, right? In a nutshell. So it was super central in the Turkish context, modernity, Asrlik, because it was used to justify lots of these crazy epoch-making reforms. And this is something which we don't see in Western Europe. When the Weimar Republic sort of tried to reinvent itself, it wasn't through this concept. It was there were other concepts being used. So the Moderne, yeah, wasn't there. Or in 20th France, modernité wasn't the central concept. So we have this interesting paradoxon, right? And this is also where we come when it comes to the conclusion that we have, modernity, which is very peripheral in the West, but very central in the Ottoman Empire, and especially in the young Turkish Republic. And as I said earlier, for Europeanists who want to do a concept history, history of modernity won't allow them at all to better understand 19th century developments. It's other concepts like civilization, like law, like democracy, parliamentarism, all these concepts. Sort of they will do the trick. But because modernity as a period happened without the concept. This is what they have to do. Which of course, is then brings the question to the table, which I raised at the beginning already. If it's just a projection from the past, and it can mean anything and everything at the same time, how useful is the concept? I think it's not very useful. I think it's very sexy, it's very evocative, and I love having modernity in a title. But it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't allow us, when we say that the French Revolution was driven by modernity, and this doesn't mean anything at all. We can say, of course, Enlightenment ideas, they had a role, etc. But it's not modernity. Or if you say it's modernity, then you have to explain exactly what you mean by modernity. Rationalism, new kinds of philosophy, etc. But it's not clear what it means. Okay, so this is also something we as Ottomanists should discuss, especially with the Eurocentrism, which is always attached to that notion of modernity. Is it useful? I would love to know your thoughts on that in the Q&A. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, the bus modification. I mean, yeah, it's being used for everything. People use it um, to um, to advertise something, right? If it's hygienic modernity, you can work on 19th century London sewer systems more sexy, right? Because obviously when you use modernity, it means that something a big break in history in historical time happened. And when we're historians, right, this is the one thing we deal with, right? Breaks. We try to understand breaks. So yeah, really, really sexy. Okay, so what's more interesting for us as non-Europeanists, it's so modernity did actually happen. It was a performative concept. It's not something we can ignore or we shouldn't ignore. It was, the 20s and 30s. It was there. We could do more research, definitely, and sort of how the concept of how this concept, sort of also infiltrated sociological discourse, or no, this would be another study. I mean, Ottoman is not a Republican Turkey historian, but I think it would be super interesting to exactly study how Cyrillic worked. And yeah, it's part of the historical makeup of the Turkish Republic. So yeah, it was a tool for them to sort of transcend Eurocentrism by saying, well, we don't want to become European, we just want to become modern. Um, I like the civilized concept, right? We don't want to be European, we just want to be civilized. But because civilized is a concept, we don't use it anymore. We use modern. So we have to deal with the words we still use. So otherwise, I think most of the things I just said are also applicable to other concepts. Yes, let's wrap up. I think I was a bit too long, but I hope it's still okay. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you. Eyüp.
Heh, çok teşekkürler. Daniel Hocam, ağzınıza sağlık. Şimdi sorusu olanlardan hemen başlayabiliriz. Benim bir soracaklarım var hocam, ama benimkilere geçeriz. Geçmeden önce konuklarımızın soruları neler, ne merak ediyorlar? Hem bu sunumunuzla ilgili, tez çalışmanızla ilgili ve bununla ilgili yani son dönem Osmanlı kavramsal tarihi ve erken cumhuriyet çalıştığınız belli. Buradan yola çıkabiliriz. Sorusu olanlar merak ettiklerini sorabilirler.
Hı, teşekkürler Eren.
Benim iki tane sorum var hocam. Onu yazmıştım. Hem İngilizce olarak dursun diye.
Hı hı.
O şeyden okuyabilirsiniz. Türkçesini de buradan size sormak istiyorum. Osmanlı son dönem açıkladığınız Servet-i Fünun kavramları, Servet-i Fünun'un modernite kavramları. Bir de erken cumhuriyette biliyoruz ki Osmanlı geçmişiyle zıtlaşma ve Osmanlı entelektüelini, geçmişini, modernitesini doğal olarak reddetme var. Hem bir devam var, hem universal olarak bir devamlılığı var Osmanlı entelektüelinin. Çünkü Cumhuriyeti de yaşıyorlar ve sonuçta bu batılılaşma fikrini, o global küresel batılılaşma fikrini bir yandan devam ettiriyorlar. Ama bir yandan da Osmanlı entelektüelinin, özellikle Tanzimat bürokratının modernite batılılaşmasıyla sorunları var. Ve genel olarak Osmanlı'nın bütün geçmişini reddetme şeyindeler. Doğal olarak bu kavramlar yeniden Cumhuriyet döneminde adlandırılıyor mu? Hem değişen dil koşulları, kavramlar, yenilenen kavramlar ideolojik olarak moderniteyi ve sekülerizmi tanımlarken yenileniyor mu? Diğer ikincisi yine bununla alakalı. Bu sizin takip ettiğiniz, sürdüğünüz modernitenin Osmanlı olmayan, sadece Türkiye Cumhuriyeti'ne ait yeni kavramları, kavramsallaştırmaları neler? Yani Osmanlı geçmişini reddeden ve yeni bir başlangıç, yeni evrensel, yeni cumhuriyet başlangıcı yapan, Fransız devriminin başlangıcı gibi yeni cumhuriyetle başlangıç yapan yeni kavramsal kullanımlar, yeni kavramlar neler? İzini sürebildiğiniz, takip ettikleriniz var mı?
Hmm. Yeah, I think these are really important questions. But let me remind you the aesthetic concept, it was coined in Ottoman period, right? So and I'm talking about sort of semantic sort of stabilities or changes. So it's my question was never what do they mean by modernity? My question was rather sort of how was it used and why did it become interesting to them? And I think the aesthetic concept became interesting because it allowed them to discuss historical change without using the concept of Europeanization, which of course is a concept which again came back during the or was also used during the Kemalist period, right? Sort of Avrupalaşma, Gapalaşma, it wasn't absent there. So in when it comes to these questions that are changes between the Ottoman and the Republican concept of modernity, there's no difference. It's the same. But of course, the things that could be done, and that's the important thing. The things that could be done with this concept that changed. So as I said, from 1919 onwards, for the first time, we have open calls for laiklik, ladinilik. That's the concept they initially used, right? So that's a first, but it's not. So maybe their idea of modernity changed, but not the concept of modernity changed. They were still aesthetic, and that became stable. Of course, at one point it changed to Çağdaş, but I think that's much later. So um, um, yeah, I mean the thing you just referred to, right? This Kemal is this notion of breaking with the past. We also see this in the Ottoman case when they discuss the Tanzimat period. So there's in the 1890s, I saw many discussions on the Tanzimat in Servet Fünun, but also there was this Tanzimatçılar debate in 1913 in reaction to the Balkan Wars. So Turkists and Islamists said, well, this problem we are having right now, it's a result of the Tanzimat. We have this um, Sünayet, this polarization of society in westernized elite and a hurafeli bir halk. You know, this is the dichotomy they said they made. But then more Westernists, people like Mustafa Sati, for example, he said, well, no, this is not what happened at all. There's no, it was a revolution, the Tanzimat, and everything changed basically. Everything changed from before. So the Tanzimat also became an epochal turning point. So be it the 1920s or be it the 1850s, 60s, people always, make claims for, or not always, but since modernity, people always use this device to say they're different because it's always it's a claim, right? It's something you can make all sorts of political claims with this sort of argument. It's very powerful. So yeah, but yeah, thanks for this question. Because it's confusing, right? It's there's no big break. Um, but of course, later you have these big narratives which try to make this break, but not around particular concepts.
Başka merak ettiğiniz başka sorular ya da soru var mı? Daniel Hocam, diğer katılanlar düşünene kadar istiyorsanız sizin eklemek istediğiniz sunumdan başka kafanızda olan vurgulamak istediğiniz e, şeyler, konular varsa onları da şey yapabilirsiniz. E,
Mhm.
girebilirsiniz, ekleme yapabilirsiniz yani kendiniz istediğiniz gibi.
So yeah, again, as I said in the beginning, this is we're discussing concepts or like genealogies of concepts. Sort of at what point in time did concepts become interesting for historical actors? At what point could they become performative in societies? This is the question I'm after. So it's not about ideas per se. It's rather about sort of discursive settings and um, my finding is that the Ottoman discursive setting was very much in favor of discussing, it's a setting in which historical breaks were very prominent, or became a very important theme. So yenilik became, this way, as a concept, way more central than in the West European societies, where there was a different relationship to historical time. There were similar discussions, of course, but um, it was less about being backwards. This was not something that Germans or French people discussed. They discussed, of course, degeneration, right? So sort of like, are we too civilized, for example? This was a question, they always asked. And yeah, modernity just didn't mean anything to them. What wasn't important for them. So stuff like that. So and maybe one last word to frame this whole presentation and this article. It really is sort of a byproduct of a larger engagement with how Ottomans conceptualize change. I mean, Eyyub knows that because he works on the concept of tradition. You can't just use one particular concept. No, it's part of a bigger question. There's social histories, political histories to be told, and I've sidelined all of these things just for now to tell the complicated history of modernity and how pointless it is for us to use this concept actually. But for these other questions, how did Ottomans what was the ideal society? What was notions of break? What was notions of civilization? These questions cannot be answered with this sort of approach. You have to look exactly into the ideological landscape and look at the actors and their particular visions. So it's not an either or. Don't get me wrong. It's just this was one attempt, sort of one intervention, let's say, but it shouldn't replace the other hard work of actually engaging with historical actors and ideas.
Thank you. Teşekkürler Daniel Hocam. Ben yeniden şey yapayım. Osmanlı büyük bir aralıkta derin çalışmalar yaptınız. Yani Servet Fünun'u ben doktora tezinizden biliyorum. Hem teorik olarak hem de ampirik olarak bayağı bir uğraştınız. Osmanlı son dönem ve erken Cumhuriyet kavram tarihi çalışanları, sizin de zorluklarınız gerçekten yani mesela işte Fransız ya da sizin kendi Alman ekolünüzde zaten büyük kavramlar, çok büyük ve bazen de yerli kavramlar. Zaten ansiklopediden biliyoruz. Koselle'nin yaptığı izleri kolay sürüyor. Bu Osmanlı tarihi ve erken Cumhuriyet çalışıldığında şu anda sizi zorlayan ya da soru işaretlerine götüren, içinden bazen çıkılmaz şey yapan zorlukları neler? Sizin kendi çalışmanızdan ya da gelecekte de yapacağınız şeylerde
Hmm.
hangi soruları ortaya atıyorsunuz? Osmanlı'da kavram tarihi çalışmakta bir pattern, bir örüngü, bir örüntü çıkarabildiniz mi? Bu sizin işinizi kolaylaştırıyor mu? Gelecekte kolaylaştıracak mı? Benim bir düşünce tarihçisi olarak Osmanlı tarihçiliğinde en çok zorlandığım şeylerden biri. Tabii ki bütün düşünce tarihçileri için bu geçerli. Ama çok çok düşündüğüm oluyor bunun üzerine. Sizin de bu zorluklar ve en azından çalışanlar ve çalışacaklara tavsiye ve işlerini kolaylaştıracak önerileriniz var mı?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you so much. I think it's without alternative to engage with concepts. I don't think you have to make this your priority. For me, this wasn't a priority at the beginning, but I understood if I want to understand modernity, sort of as a consciousness of a historical consciousness, I need to engage with the concepts that historical actors used and which they contested. What is millet? Who's Gayri Milli and what moment? What is edebiyat? Who is this concept, right? I mean, they're part of social society, right? So, no, there's no society without language, right? So, I think this is a thing we have to do, and especially, yeah, we have to be extremely aware of the language we use, and it's even more so when we move in a multi-language setting But then, of course, Öztürkçe, right, has changed so much, from Ottoman Turkish. Um, that's why, yeah, yeah, I'll come in a second, Eren. So I mean, Öztürkçe is so different from Ottoman Turkish that also we are dealing with different languages basically. So being aware of the languages of the sources is so fundamental. And I think also Alperen has done some beautiful Alperen Topal, some beautiful interventions when it comes to what is Osmanlılık, right? Ottomanism. And just by looking at the concepts, themselves, you understand how the discussions were framed very differently from what we thought they were framed. So that's my most important takeaway. It's without alternative. It's something we have to do, um, whether it's at the heart of your research or not. That's up to you. If you want to label your own research, that's also something. I think it's a very male thing. Like only men do concept histories, whereas women they do it without labeling it such. Like Başak Tu, I don't know if you know her. She she shows works on concept of namus, irs, etc. So it's all these really important legal concepts which are central for any social history, but she doesn't practice concept history in itself. So yeah, it's without alternative. As a historian, and especially from this modern Turkish point of view, who's also engaging with English research literature. One last example. I'm writing an article on the concept of race, Ottoman race concepts, ırk, because I noticed that it's all over the place in Servet Fünun, ırk, but nobody has really worked on that. And basically, the only attempt to really engage with Ottoman race concepts or racism, that's racism and race are not the same, of course, right? But sort of Ottoman racialist practices is the Ottoman Orientalism debate, right? Also Magdisi, Selim Deringil, and they come from an American perspective, and they use race very differently. They have very different theoretical background, very different projections as well. Also Magdisi, I mean, has Arab background, so maybe also he has a different perspective, different positionality. But the way that he used race, I think, was a bit rash. It's not conceptually very precise. So that's why it was easy for others like Özgür Türesay or Edip Gölbaşı to debunk this notion, saying, well, their race concept is, or their concepts of difference when they talk about Vahşi, they don't actually mean racialist things, which is true. But there still is room for for middle spaces, and I think if we are more specific or precise about our concept of race, then we get to interesting places. Then we actually understand the object of our of our research better. So yeah, I think it's without alternative to actually understand something. Otherwise, it's just very fuzzy. Um,
Eren'in sorusu var mı
yeah, sorry.
mesajlarda?
Uh-huh. Ha, bu iyi bir soru. Maybe it's again this problem. I'm not talking about modernities as a thing. I'm talking about the word. And once we have this word, we could start to reconstruct modernities. We could do that if we want to. We could discuss different modernization paths, but that's not what I did. You could do that, but in the um, in the Ottoman context, in what my takeaway from this very different experience is that it's this notion of being under pressure being under force to change. And one metaphor that jumps at you in the source is the Seyle Huruşanı Medeniyet. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So the coşkun sel. So basically, historical time is not a it's something that rushes at you, and if you don't hide, if you don't, or if you can't swim in this and roaring torrent, this coşkun sel, then you die basically. So this is something which I'm sure you wouldn't see in English or American or French sources, but it's something which you see a lot in Ottoman sources. So this, it's this social Darwinist notion: we either we die or we adapt, we find we get to modernize. I think this is one, this is on a structural level a main difference. But when it comes to details, of course, the whole notion of nationalism, right? The Manevi, Maddi distinction. But also in Germany, you have this, for example. In Germany, you have this against France. Germany also sort of was a defensive modernization against France in the 19th century. Um, yeah. France then against Germany in the late 19th century. It's there's not this one pure Batı modernlik, I think. There's yeah. Or like it's difficult to sort of generalize like that. I hope I could answer your question. These are big, big concepts and abstract things, and I personally don't feel too comfortable to talk about this because and we're always essentializing in a way, right? And I feel like concept history is a way out of essentializations. But then again, we need to find new narratives. So your question is valid. I don't have a good answer for that.
E, Teşekkürler. Başka sorusu olan, e, katkı yapmak isteyen, yorumda bulunmak isteyen varsa alabiliriz sorularını ya da katkılarını.
Değilse sorun değil. Herkes eve gitmek istiyor. Herkes acıkmış olacak. Sorun değil. Ama yani sizle konuşmak çok güzeldi. Yani o yüzden ve o bir diyalog, değil mi? Yani
Çok
bu akşam yani bir sorunuz yoksa başka bir zaman sorabilirsiniz. Yani e, ya da yani o yani açık bir yani.
çok teşekkürler hocam. Kitabınızı, tezinizin kitaplaşacak şeyini ne zaman çıkacak?
Ha.
Planınız var mı ya da bir süresi?
Yani gelecek sene e, ilkbahar
Hmm.
manuskripti teslim edeceğim. Ama tam bu konu hakkında New Time ile ilgili bir makale yazacağım birazdan. E, Umarım ki biraz da erken çıkacak. Ama maalesef evet, yani bu hala biraz yani siz isterseniz yani doktor tezimi okuyabilirsiniz. Ben göndereceğim size, yani ilgilenenlere. E, Ama evet, maalesef. Yani
Bana ilgilenenler bana yazabilirler. Ben hocaya size tezi iletebilirim. Hocadan alıp ya da hocaya da direkt yazabilirsiniz.
tabii sebep.
Adresine
Göndereceğim.
ulaşabilirsiniz.
Hı hı.
İnşallah hocam kitabınız çıktığında da ister Türkçe ister İngilizce yine sizi seve seve ağırlamak isteriz. Açıkçası onu da çok merak ediyorum. Çünkü dedim ya, sizin çalışmanın derinliği ve bence çeşitliliği Osmanlı kavram tarihi çalışmalarında ben çok önemli bir yerde. Ama şunu görüyorum sizin çalışmanızdan, sanki Osmanlı kavram tarihi çalışmaları hız kazanmadan, ivme kazanmadan hmm, devam ediyor gibi. Yani yükselişe geçmeden sabit ilerliyor gibi. O da açıkçası beni şaşırtıyor. Çünkü ben de hani ilgilendim, biliyorsunuz. O kadar çok yapılacak şey. Düşünce tarihini o kadar çok çeşitlendirecek bir alan ki, ama herhalde bazı disiplinler bazı yerlerde, bazı ülkelerde yer bulamıyor. Ya da onların kendi geçmişleri, disipliner geçmişleri de ona el vermiyor. Türkiye'de kavram tarihi çalışmaları Türkiye ile ilgili sizin de yaptığınız gibi yurt dışında ilerliyor. Bir sürü isimden biliyoruz. Açıkçası o da beni düşündürüyor. Herhalde formasyon ve ülkelerin eğitim geleneği, ülkelerin eğitim sistemiyle de doğrudan ilgili. Ama merak ediyorum, gelecekte bu değişecek mi? Nasıl bir yöne gidecek? Açıkçası merak ediyorum.
Evet. Ama mesela Amerika'da çok yaygın, çok sevilen bir şey değil. Yani oradaki Ortadoğu'la ilgili çalışmaları çoğu zaman yani genel olarak entelektüel tarihinden biraz kaçınıyorlar.
Hı
Yani
hı.
hep sosyal tarihi olsun ve bu çok mükemmel bir şey tabii. Çünkü bazen hani biz yani biraz düşüncelerinde yani kayboluyoruz ve
Hı hı.
bugün yaptığım sunum biraz böyle bir şey tabii ki. Yani hiç sosyal tarihten bahsetmedim ve
Hı hı.
bu tebrikli bir şey. Ama aynı zamanda evet yani e, Amerika'daki araştırmacılar biraz bir şey kaçırıyor bence.
Hı hı.
Evet yani mükemmel bir yer yok tabii yani.
Hı
Ama
hı.
yani çok teorik bir şey olması gerekmiyor zaten yani kavramsal tarihi. Sadece yani yani çok iptidai, ilkel bir ilgi. Yani bu kavramlar nereden geliyor? Ona iyi bir tanımı vermek yeter bence. Ama tabii ki yani sonra ileride bir sözlük gibi şey mükemmel olur.
Hı hı.
Yani medeniyet kavramı ya da hukuk kavramı nereden geliyor vesaire. Yani gelenek kavramı öyle şeyler. Yani bu tabii yani mükemmel bir şey. Ama evet, onun için yani büyük fonlara, büyük ağlara ihtiyacı var. Ve inşallah olacak.
Zamana da ihtiyacımız var sanki.
Hep zaman. Zaman sağlık. Evet. Tamam.
Tamam. Herhalde hocam başka soru yok. Ekleme yapacak da biri yok. Çok teşekkür ederiz hocam. Çok sağ olun. Sunumunuz için, zaman ayırdığınız için. Eren de teşekkür etmiş aşağıdan. Diğer hocalarımıza teşekkür ediyor. Biz de onlara teşekkür ediyoruz katıldıkları için ve dinledikleri için. Sağ olun.
Teşekkürler. İyi akşamlar.
İyi akşamlar. Çok teşekkürler.
Ben de.
Görüşürüz. İyi günler.